Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. My mom recently shared a story about my late Aunt Sarah, her lifelong friend and fellow software developer. So in her memory and in the spirit of the upcoming holidays, I present for you the tale of nepotism, coding students, and Taylor Swift. Aunt Sarah was a senior developer at a small tech startup in Silicon Valley and a programming instructor at the local community college. She was also, unofficially, in charge of the office events. To help offset the costs, she had a small acrylic box on a table outside of her cubicle with a slot in it so anyone could donate money to the event fund. Everyone knew about it and were happy to chip in. A month or so before the company's big end-of-year party, Aunt Sarah decided to check the box. Lo and behold, it was empty. Aunt Sarah knew something was fishy because she had seen several colleagues putting money in the box. This could only mean one thing: someone was stealing from the event fund. At this moment, Jake, the CEO's son and a fellow developer, came around the corner. Something about the way Jake was looking at her made Aunt Sarah suspicious. "Hey, Sarah, what's up?" Jake said, his eyes darting to the empty box. "Oh, just checking on our event fund," Aunt Sarah replied, watching his reaction closely. Jake didn't have a good reputation around the office, to say the least. He had a reputation for being pushy, obnoxious, rude, and just plain entitled. Unfortunately, he was not only the CEO's golden boy, but knew how to skirt the rules so he wouldn't get fired. Aunt Sarah decided to set a trap to catch the thief. Using her coding skills, she set up a hidden webcam right by the box. She then had a colleague loudly brag about how she contributed $200 to the event fund. Then she waited. She got a notification that the camera was recording, and watched Jake open the empty box, scowl in disgust, and throw the box against the wall. "Damn it," Jake muttered, kicking the fallen box. Now you'd think this would end with Aunt Sarah presenting the video evidence to her boss to get Jake fired, but oh no. As I mentioned in a previous post, if there's one thing developers love, it's solving problems. And if it's coding students, they'll make it an experience to remember. Aunt Sarah then went to her coding students. She offered them extra credit to come up with a rigged box that would make noise when opened. The more obnoxious the sound, the higher the bonus. "All right, class," she announced. "Who's up for a real-world coding challenge?" 1 week later, they delivered their project and demonstrated how it worked. Pleased with the results, Aunt Sarah awarded them the extra credit as promised. The next day, she set up the rigged box and proclaimed, "Well, isn't this nice? Someone donated $100 to the event fund." Then she went to her cubicle and waited. The coding students had rigged the box with one of those inserts from cards that play music when you open them. By popular vote, they had picked "Shake It Off" by Taylor Swift. Right around the time the song was beginning to become overplayed. They also managed to ensure that once opened, the box couldn't close unless you pressed a hidden side button releasing the hinge, so the song would continue to play. For extra funsies, they made sure to angle the insert for maximum volume and secured it down with industrial-strength glue. Sure enough, everyone in the office heard Taylor Swift's peppy voice belting the now annoying song and Jake's frustrated grunts while trying to close the box. "Come on, shut up already!" Jake growled, wrestling with the stubborn box. One of those attracted by the sound was Jake's father, the CEO. Finally, Jake chucked the box at the wall, managing to put a good-sized dent in it. The CEO's voice boomed across the office. "Jake, my office now!" 15 minutes later, Jake left with a cardboard box and cleared out his desk, along with a note in his file, "Do not rehire, do not recommend." So, his tech career was over. As Jake sulked out, Aunt Sarah couldn't help but think, I guess he'll just have to shake it off. The next one is an entitled people's story. I never thought I'd be telling a story like this, but here we are. It was just another boring Saturday afternoon, and I was killing time at the local grocery store while my mom finished up some errands. I'm 15, and like most kids my age, I was glued to my phone, scrolling through social media and texting friends. I was standing in the snack aisle, trying to decide between chips or cookies, when I felt someone tap me on the shoulder. I turned around to see a middle-aged woman with a "Can I speak to the manager" haircut giving me the stink eye. "Excuse me, young man," she said in a tone that made it clear she wasn't actually trying to be polite. "Don't you think you're a little young to have such an expensive phone?" I was caught off guard. My phone wasn't even that new or fancy, just a regular smartphone my parents got me for my birthday last year. What?" I replied, not sure how to respond to such a weird question. She crossed her arms and narrowed her eyes at me. I said, "You look too young to have a phone like that. Where did you get it? Did you steal it?" Now I was getting annoyed. Who did this lady think she was? "No, I didn't steal it. It's my phone. My parents bought it for me." She scoffed, clearly not believing me. "Right. A likely story. I think you need to hand that over so I can check if it's stolen. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was this lady for real? No way, I said, taking a step back. I'm not giving you my phone. Leave me alone. That's when things took a turn for the worse. This crazy woman lunged forward and tried to grab my phone right out of my hands. I yanked it away, but she managed to get a hold of my arm instead. Give me that phone right now, you little thief! She screeched, digging her nails into my skin. I panicked. This grown woman was assaulting me in the middle of a grocery store. Without thinking, I shoved her away from me as hard as I could. She stumbled backward and crashed into a display of chips, sending bags flying everywhere as she fell on her butt. For a second, everything was quiet. Then she started wailing like a banshee. Help! Help! This boy attacked me! Someone call the police! People started gathering around, staring at the scene. I was freaking out, worried that everyone would believe this crazy lady over me. But then I heard a familiar voice. What the hell is going on here? It was my mom, pushing through the crowd with a furious look on her face. The Karen scrambled to her feet, pointing at me dramatically. This delinquent pushed me. He stole that phone and then assaulted me when I tried to stop him. My mom's eyes narrowed dangerously. Excuse me? That's my son you're talking about. And that's the phone his father and I bought him for his birthday. The woman faltered for a second, but doubled down on her lie. Well, he shouldn't have pushed me. I want him arrested for assault. That's when another voice chimed in. Actually, ma'am, I saw the whole thing. It was an older guy who had been browsing the aisle when everything went down. This boy was minding his own business when you accosted him and tried to take his phone. You grabbed his arm and he only pushed you in self-defense. The Karen's face went pale. She started sputtering excuses, but by then, the store manager had shown up. What's the problem here? He asked, looking between all of us. My mom stepped forward. This woman assaulted my son and tried to steal his phone. We'd like to file a complaint and press charges. The manager turned to the Karen. Is this true, ma'am? She tried to deny it, but by then, several other customers had come forward to back up what the first witness said. The manager asked to review the security camera footage, and that's when the Karen really started to panic. No, there's no need for that, she stammered. This was all just a misunderstanding. I'll be going now. She tried to make a break for it, but the manager stopped her. I'm afraid I can't let you leave until we sort this out. I've already called the police. My mom put her arm around me protectively. Are you okay, honey? Did she hurt you? I showed her the red marks on my arm where the woman had grabbed me. My mom's face darkened with anger. When the police arrived, they took statements from everyone involved and reviewed the security footage. It clearly showed the whole incident, proving that the Karen was the aggressor and I had only defended myself. The cops ended up arresting her for assault and attempted robbery. As they were leading her away in handcuffs, she was still trying to play the victim. This isn't fair! I was just trying to be a good citizen. That boy is the real criminal here. The officer just shook his head. Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. After everything calmed down, the store manager apologized profusely for what happened. He even offered us a gift card as compensation for the trouble, which was nice of him. As we were leaving, I overheard some other customers talking. Can you believe that woman? Who does she think she is, trying to steal a kid's phone like that? Some people are just crazy, another replied. Good thing that boy stood up for himself. I have to admit, it felt pretty good to be called brave instead of a troublemaker for once. In the car on the way home, my mom turned to me with a serious look. I'm proud of you for defending yourself, but please be careful in the future. That woman could have really hurt you. I nodded, still a bit shaken by the whole experience. I know, Mom. I'm just glad you showed up when you did. She smiled and ruffled my hair. That's what moms are for, kiddo. Now how about we stop for ice cream? I think we both deserve a treat after dealing with that nonsense. As we pulled into the ice cream shop parking lot, I couldn't help but feel relieved that everything had worked out okay. It was a crazy situation, but at least justice was served in the end. And hey, I got some free ice cream out of it, so I guess it wasn't all bad. The incident definitely taught me to be more aware of my surroundings, even in places I thought were safe, like the local grocery store. You never know when a wild Karen might appear and try to snatch your phone, but it also showed me that standing up for yourself and telling the truth is always the right thing to do, even when faced with a delusional adult who thinks they can bully kids. In the weeks that followed, I found out that the Karen had been charged with assault, attempted robbery, and filing a false police report. She ended up pleading guilty to avoid a trial and got sentenced to community service and anger management classes. I hope she learned her lesson about trying to steal from kids and making up lies. As for me, I gained a newfound appreciation for security cameras and helpful bystanders. And you can bet I hold onto my phone a little tighter when I'm out in public now. You never know when you might need to document a Karen in the wild. The next one is a petty revenge story. A couple of years ago, I was pregnant and my mother-in-law, MIL, made a comment about how my husband deserved a special gift to celebrate him becoming a dad. Meanwhile, I didn't receive even a cake for my birthday, which was a month prior. I felt pretty bad, but I didn't respond. Here's where my petty revenge came in. A few months earlier, before getting pregnant, I had booked a Rolex as a birthday gift for myself, planning to treat myself. Fast forward to a few days after my Mills comment, I got a call from the sales associate about my watch being ready for pickup. I decided to go ahead and buy it right away. When I picked it up, I casually mentioned to my MIL that I bought the watch for myself because I was going to be a mother soon. You could practically hear the jealousy in her voice. Now, every time I wore it, I couldn't help but smile, knowing I treated myself while she thought my husband should be celebrated. Petty? Maybe. But sometimes you just have to take a little victory for yourself. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I used to work on the retentions department of an ISP back in the day. While many people called genuinely wanting to cancel their phone service, just as many knew that retentions was more than that. The ISP, let's call them Red Phone, had two different departments. I worked on retentions 1, where we did a lot of fixing bills and offering small discounts and slightly cheaper phones to customers who said they wanted to leave. Retentions 2 was for customers who were in the process of porting their numbers, and the worst thing they offered was a 50% discount for a couple of years with a decent phone for free. This happened roughly 10, maybe 12 years ago when roaming was straight up highway robbery. Let me introduce you to the executive. I got the call, I did my little introductory spiel, and I immediately discovered this guy was the most entitled POS I'd ever had the displeasure to speak to. He said he was a very important executive who traveled a lot for work, but the bill he got was ridiculous and I had to solve it or he was going to cancel his service. I muted him, so he heard nothing, but I could still hear what he said, and while I checked his account, I could hear him gloat to his girlfriend that he's getting the bill credited because he knows how to play the system, and he was an a-hole, but he wasn't wrong. This guy was a pro at playing Red Phone. He had the highest phone plan the company offered, which was around €90 at the time for one line, but paid €30 per month because he had discounts from both departments stacked on top of each other. His plan allowed him to get what at the time was a super expensive phone for basically nothing at Retentions 2. He'd gotten the super shiny customer status and the super shiny customer service line, which usually meant a customer was averaging a €300 monthly bill, despite his €30 ARPU, because he complained about how the delocalized customer service sucked. He was also not wrong about his bill being ridiculous. He'd visited several EU countries, got a €600 bill called customer service, and said he had not known that roaming was so expensive. No one had warned him when he told us he was traveling overseas. The company had a policy that the first time a customer complained about something, we could refund them, particularly if the complaint was that the customer had not been informed about extra charges. So the rep informed him about roaming costs and refunded him all of the roaming charges, leaving the bill at €30. Second month comes around, he kept using the phone overseas, got a €1,500 bill. He calls customer service, they tell him they can't refund him again. He says he wants to cancel his account then and gets transferred to me. He was demanding that we credited his roaming charges again because if we can do it once, we can do it again, and also because roaming prices were abusive. He did have a point there. I told him I couldn't do that, so he wanted me to open a claim and escalate it. I refused again because there was no one to escalate to. He wasn't going to get that credited. He insisted he wasn't hanging up until I escalated the issue because he wasn't informed, and if I kept the call going for much longer, he was going to charge the company for his time because he was a busy man. At this point, I'd been working there long enough that if you were nice or even normal, I would try my damnedest to help you, but if you were a prick, sorry, can't do, get lost. Customer refuses to hang up, I can hang up. This guy, though. He'd gone past being a prick into total cunt waffle, and I was pissed off. I couldn't be a prick back, but he'd been ducking around and I could make sure he found out. So I told him that okay, since he was so insistent, I would open a claim to refund him the €1,500 bill, and muted him while I opened the claim. The a-hole was again gloating at his girlfriend about how clever he was because he was going to get this bill refunded too. Meanwhile, I was copy-pasting the notes from the previous month's claim, where the rep had written, "I've informed customer of roaming charges in all the countries he told me he could be visiting." List of European countries. Also, stacking discounts? Very much not a thing. He had to spam the Retentions 1 call centers with calls until he got a newbie lost enough to apply another discount over his Retentions 2 discount. And he had not read the terms and conditions of the accounts, but I had. Trying to defraud the company was grounds for service termination. I got the claim number, flagged down my supervisor and told her to please send it to headquarters in the daily report so Fraud could examine the account. I told the guy that the claim had been opened, but also that since it was obvious he was trying to abuse the company's policies, the claim had been flagged to be reviewed by Fraud and it was likely his account would be terminated. He went from entitled to worried in 2 seconds and asked me to close the claim. Sorry, dude, can't do. You wanted a claim open, now it's open. Yes, the customer was fired. The next one is an entitled people story. So some important information. I, 33F, underwent breast reduction surgery for health purposes 2 weeks ago and have been recovering. What this means is that my chest area is very sore and I am very sensitive to things I normally wouldn't be an issue. That is driving over a pothole in the road or standing for too long. My partner and I went to one of our favorite diners for breakfast because it was his birthday. I'm not able to do much now while recovering, so I offered to at least pay since he'd have to drive us both. 2 older couples, I would estimate they were in their early 70s, walked into the very small waiting area. It was chilly outside, so I don't blame them. Won the bit, however. There was nowhere to sir when they came in. I was sitting in a single chair by the door, and normally I would absolutely offer my seat to one of them out of consideration. However, I remained sitting because due to my recent reduction surgery, standing for too long does in fact make my chest sore, and I wasn't sure how much longer I'd be waiting. Now, the way the waiting area is situated, you wait in line rather than put your name down on a wait list. The closer to the door you are sitting or standing, the sooner you get sat. It was a bit confusing when we first came in, but it got explained to us and we took our rightful place at the back of the line. So when a group who was already at the door got up to be seated by the hostess, it opened some space on the bench nearest to the door. Those of us who had already been waiting all started shuffling down the bench in the seating area, moving us closer to the door. However, the elderly group immediately sat down, not knowing they were technically cutting in line. Myself and the other couples tried to politely explain how the queue worked, but one of the elderly women interrupted us by loudly announcing, "Well, you should just let my friend sit because of her age, you know." Then gave me a nasty side-eye, rolled her eyes, and shook her head at her friend as if we should all be ashamed of ourselves. One of the families who was waiting with us tried explaining, again, how the queue was organized, but she wouldn't hear it. I finally said, "I'm sorry, I would have given you my seat, but I'm still recovering from surgery and can't stand for long periods of time. I'm sorry." It got very quiet until, finally, the same lady said, "Well, do you want to sit here?" And I just stopped her and replied, "No, please, I'm fine where I am." We all waited in silence until it was our turn to be seated. Moral of the story? Don't assume someone in a seat isn't sitting there because they don't look like need it. I got dressed in a cute outfit and did my makeup because even though I'm recovering from surgery, I want to still look and feel good. I was raised to be considerate and offer my seat to those who are elderly, pregnant, or injured. However, if I'm injured, I have the right to remain in my seat. Please don't assume the worst about others. I've heard so many stories that are much worse than mine about people who are disabled getting flack for not needing things such as park spots, electric scooters, or other accommodations as much as other people because they don't look disabled, which is totally unfair. I'm only recovering from a surgery temporarily. I don't have to live with this every day, but others do. Let's learn to put aside our entitlement and give others the benefit of the doubt. And if we truly need help or consideration, ask. That's how you normalize better treatment of others. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.